In today's journey, we take lazy to a whole new level with our lazy cherry wine, as last time we got called out for not being lazy enough. Although the one thing you can't be lazy about is sanitation. We always use Star San off camera. And for those that take pride in your work, you may want to avert your eyes as what we're about to make is one step above prison hooch, but about twice as good. And don't forget to check the description for the recipe and other useful links. But let's get started here. Like any other time we're using fruit, we like to use frozen. Even if they're coming from our own trees, we would freeze them first. This is not only one of the ways that you could help preserve them and prevent infection in your wine, but a more intended goal here is to render the juices easier. And Phil's genius way of breaking up the still frozen cherries is by forcing them through a way too small hole and jiggling it out. Seems to be working fine. Personally, I would have took the opportunity to whack it with a mallet. However, Phil did assure me that this is in fact the dumbest thing he did all day, but I of course have my suspicions. He is often left unsupervised. For example, he could have done a much better job showing the cherries thawing over time. We have the equipment to do time-lapse like that. I guess he just got lazy making lazy wine. But we'll cut back to it real quick, and you can see just how much smaller these cherries have gotten as they thawed, really rendering out a lot of those juices. That's thanks to all the ice crystals as formed during the freezing process. The only downside to using frozen fruit is that they're basically ice cubes. So you want to make sure that when you add the 96 ounces of cherry juice, that it's going to not be colder than room temperature before you pitch the yeast. Which is the second most important thing that we do today, is don't shock the yeast. About 75 degrees Fahrenheit, or room temperature. And just like the frozen cherries, we're using a mix of both tart and sweet. This is an attempt to bring in depth to the flavor, as otherwise the only flavor is cherry. And to help make the most out of that, we're going to use the K1 V1116 to help preserve that fruit aroma. Plus it's going to adapt to really bad fermentation conditions with relative ease. Sure, you could use the EC in its place, but it would come out drier and with a bit less of a fruit flavor to it. But in keeping with lazy tradition, we've decided to forego an airlock and use a watch glass instead. The lids that come with the demijohns really aren't that much better. Traditionally, you could get away with just cheesecloth, but now you have to answer the question of how lazy you are. Are you going to stir the yeast in, or just leave it on top? We went with super lazy. Let this sit for about 2 weeks, and when you come back, the cherries should look nasty. And if you're nasty, get a jug and a funnel. We're not that nasty. We are lazy, though. And properly equipped. You see, our anti-gravity pump makes stewing secondary a breeze. No muss, no fuss, just pump some sanitizer through. Check out the link in the description to find out how you can get one for yourself. It really is worth the investment. And to the guy currently writing a comment about, hey, this is supposed to be lazy, why are you doing a secondary? You'll see in a second. But they're not completely wrong. You could just grab a ladle and start dishing this out now. But Phil did maintain the ultimate lazy thing you can do in winemaking. Forgo the hydrometer reading and just wing it. This should be around 9 to 10% alcohol. But I guess we'll just have to guess. You'll have to click that subscribe button if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on when we do a more sophisticated blueberry wine in the near future. Or leave a negative comment down below and let us know how much you hate our videos. Some have even gone so far as to say that our videos are better on mute. And speaking of better, it's better to do a secondary as it does enhance the flavor of your wine when dealing in these stressful situations. Not only will some extra time give some maturity to the flavor, but getting off these cherries is a big concern at this point. That would be because any physical matter that's poking out of the water level is susceptible to growing mold if left unattended for too long. That's why pickle crocks come with weights. But here's the real gold we were after. We want some of this sediment from the primary. It will re-roust any of the yeast that may have settled out and finish off some fermentation that may be left to do. Because funnily enough, in our studio, it's easier to do a transfer than a hydrometer reading. Technically, you should be using a refractometer when fermenting these small amounts, but that might be getting a bit beyond lazy again. We got yelled at last time for using scientific equipment in the last video. That's also why we didn't use any pectic enzymes. We didn't want to get in trouble again. But something that will get you in trouble when doing lazy wines is that the flavor consistency between batch to batch probably isn't going to be the same. So we're going to skip tasting notes on this one. What we don't know is why Phil is skipping the airlock for the secondary. You should definitely use an airlock on secondary on these ones so you can have an idea of what's actually going on inside. But that's always the cross-section, is from lazy to quality. You're not going to get the best tasting wine doing it the simplest way. But if basically making hooch at home from store-bought ingredients is what you were after, then this video probably got what you were after. If you're looking for something else, click on one of these other ones. And as always, happy venting.